All right, welcome back, Axe Hounds, to the Axe Hounds podcast, a podcast just for axes. This is Leaf and Chris back again for episode 3, and we thought we'd step our foot into the controversial topics for the first time, and maybe spark some conversation, ruffle some feathers. And maybe we'll do this periodically because just as many good information that's out there about axes, collecting, use, and there's just as much bad information. And I think Chris would agree that no, we're not experts.
Nope.
Nope. However, I think it would be safe to say that we have a firm grasp on the basics without patting ourselves on the back. You know what I mean? And we speak from a place of experience.
Definitely.
And with that, let's jump right in. I think easiest one to cover is a topic that came up. It's come up actually a couple times recently in the groups, and that's the myths and malarkey about wedging. Yeah, Sparks. I think our group, not counting others, did a very good job without jumping off the cliff. You know what I mean? As far as outrage culture, I mean, everybody's got good points. And there's a conclusion to come out of all of it. But I think between Chris and I, we've tried just about everything in a different. You know what I mean?
I've tried both hard and soft wedges, and I can't say that I have a preference either way.
And I've done both, several species of both. I do like working with poplar when I can hand select the wedging grain and all that stuff. But I can make anything work with a little bit of patience. So I don't, in the end, I don't think it really matters when it comes down to it. And it certainly doesn't matter enough to hold an opinion so hard that you attack others for it, because that seems really silly. I think
it said in the thread that was brought up, it's a good argument could be made both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, I lean, and this is just a philosophy, there's no proof behind this, but I lean towards a soft wedge because my thoughts are, if you put a big fat wedge in there and it's softer than the handle material, more of that wood is going to squeeze into that curve. Versus if you have a hardwood, it's not going to give as much. Therefore, we're not putting as much in the wedge. Now, either way, as long as the head is splayed out above the top of the eye, the axe isn't going anywhere. So
it's not going anywhere. Yep.
You're winning either way. I think how you do it is more important than what type of wood you use.
I think that's a perfect direction to steer this. And I know Chris does. I know I do, and several others. It's not like we're providing any new information, but it may be new information for people who don't get this detail. But regardless of which wood species I'm using for a wedge, my result's going to end up the same. But I prep my wedge, I size it, I match it to the eye. I have like several. I haven't even made all the axe tips yet, or the steps I take to when I really want to do one nice, that I take to have that wedge fill my curve to the bottom and be clean and splay the top over the top of the eye. Which there is another. I mean, we didn't even put that on this one. Which is we could probably do another topic on that altogether, about putting the mushroom in the eye or the neck over the eye.
Yeah, leave it flush or leave it pronounced.
Yeah, it's literally like a 30-minute podcast by itself. But like with wedging, I take a time I bevel the back of the wedge because the back of the eye has got a half circle in it. I take that time. My wedge fits down into the depth of my eye 3/4 of the way before the bottom of the wedge starts hitting the wall. So when I slap that sucker down in there, I've fit it, and I gave it a little bit of squeeze at the bottom. And I do a little bit of measuring to make sure, and especially like with a hardwood wedge, if I've done an oak or a maple, if you don't get the thickness right, if you get it too thick, it's going to lock up. You're not going to bottom out, and you should really shoot for that. Do you have to do it every time? No, but I mean, why not? Why not go for broke? You know what I mean?
I think it's important to take the time to prep the wedge, make the wedge fit the eye, make it fit the curve, know what depth, like put a line on the wedge so you know when you're pounding in and it stops moving, you can look at that reference line. Yeah, it's bottomed out. These are all important steps, more important than what type of wood you used.
Yep, for sure.
It doesn't matter what wood you put in there. If you didn't get the wedge deep enough, it's going to back out. If you didn't cut the wedge to the right width, it's going to split. If you didn't take the time to chamfer edges in that, it's going to peel the wood off the side of the wedges, which is not good. I mean, the whole point of it is to wedge the wood into the curve. Like that's by definition, it's a wedge. So,
you know what? Yeah, go ahead.
It's more important to prep and install the wedge than it is what freaking wood you use.
Yeah, I've made, I've even gone the soft end. I remember I was playing around with Eastern White Pine, and I was squeezing 1/2-inch wide wedges down into a 3/8 hole. You know what I mean? Curve size, but because it was so spongy, and I have a heavy weighted mallet, that percussion's nice that you can just keep walking that wedge down in, as long as your neck holds up, of course. And some guys will say, I'm quite certain, well, I just pound anything in there. I never have an issue. It's not walking right out and chopping some trees. It's the 5 years from now, the 6 years from now that you're swinging that axe, and you got to deal with a loose head that you end up cutting corners to tighten up, is why you go through the trouble of getting the wedge right in the first place. Mm. So I've been using the same bushcraft axe for, when did I make? I don't even know when I made that. It was back when I lived in the apartment. That head is as snug as the day that I put it on, because I took all those steps, and nobody could tell me that one in particular doesn't have a lot of use on it. I've chopped some really questionable stuff with that thing, and the proof is in the pudding. And with that, though, I think we can step into slightly more controversial things like wedge lube. Do you or don't you? And what's the best choice? And I'll tell you what, there's just as many opinions on that as there is the wood species you use to put in the neck. So I don't know if you want to go with that one, if you like.
So I don't use wedge lube unless you want to call glue wedge lube, and that's kind of a side controversy, I guess. I used to try to put boiled linseed oil on my wedges and then pound them. And one time when I was doing that, I set my wedge, walked away from the axe. 3 seconds later, the wedge shot across the freaking shop like a gunshot.
That's awesome.
I'm not even exaggerating. It was under so much pressure that the added lube or boiled linseed oil allowed that wedge to back out. So it made me think about something. It's oil, so it does reduce friction. So it made me think, well, maybe it was too tight or whatever, but let's say it wasn't too tight. What's going to happen to that wedge eventually? It's going to back out. So I don't use any oil on my wedges. I use glue. My philosophy on the glue is people say they don't use glue, and this is their argument. I don't use glue because you take the axe in and outside, the wood expands and contracts, blah, blah, blah. Heads start loosening up. You need to pound the wedge deeper and tighten the head. Well, you just diagnosed what the problem was to begin with.
Yeah.
You didn't set the wedge deep enough. So if you do the proper prep work with the wedge and the wedge is bottomed out, if you glue it, then the wedge can't back out. Therefore, you're never going to have to reset that wedge. If everything shrinks, which is highly unlikely, it would take many years. It's not going to take in and out of a house overnight. If everything shrinks, and I'm talking you hung this axe right, everything's swollen above and below the eye. If it's not going to shrink to the point where you're going to have to repound the wedge. And if you've already have the wedge bottomed out and it can't back out, and you have a loose head problem, we got another problem.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not you're not going to
stick,
pound the wedge any deeper.
Yeah, your stick was green when it went in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like Chris, I've used both. So far, I've never had a wedge back out with the oil. But Chris is not the first person that's had that happen. So it's certainly something to think about. When I used to put wedges in, I used to soak everything in oil when I put them through. Five or so I've done. I literally am just putting a wetting of it on there to start with, and then getting it all the way down, and then dressing the clean kerf and neck with oil after that. Probably getting some more expansion, but I've dropped it down in there so I don't have an issue where I might have so much lubricant on that wedge that it might back out on me. But I've done wood glue too. I have wood glue ones behind me, and I used oil. But like Chris and I keep saying, even then, in the end, if you're not getting the right sized wedge in there and you're not getting it bottomed out like you should, you can run into issues all the way around. So I don't think it really matters. I think there could be a case made maybe with certain types of adhesive that you use on them. Maybe when you start drilling down, you get that wedge halfway through, you can generate a lot of friction and heat, which may cause some cheaper glues to set up really fast. But I other than that, I can't see there being any really issues.
I've never had an issue.
Yeah.
My other thought process on that whole deal is if you put everything together dry and then add oil, what's it going to do? Expand.
Mm-hmm.
If you started with an oil-soaked wedge, it's already expanded. So when that oil dries up, it's going to shrink. So
yeah, I'm using less and less, and I'm doing more after I've got the wedge set into the kerf. And that's yeah, go ahead.
Do your prep work, put it together dry, use glue, don't use glue, whatever. I use it because my thought is if it's glued in, it can't back out ever. Because a glued wood, usually the wood will fail before the joint will.
Mm-hmm.
And then once all that's done, then you add your oil. Then it just freaking blows up and it's never going anywhere.
And in the end, when it comes down to it, go with what you know and what works well for you.
Yep.
But and the only time you should question your methods is if you constantly keep having a loosening problem. Then I say that's the only time for you to address it. In the end, I don't think Chris and I are here to make definitive statements on anything. And a few years ago, I might have not said something like that personally. But I've definitely changed my view on a lot of things, and we'll get to that later. But moving down from the head down to the handle, a big topic that comes up in Myths and Malarkey is grain orientation and when it really matters. Without saying the philosophy word too much, I mean, my personal opinion is grain matters much less the shorter the handle gets to me. The longer the handle starts to get, the more grain starts to come into my my concern.
Correct.
And that's it. That's that's really as far as I take it. Once I get into some curvy handles, like the French curves, obviously, that forward to back grain orientation is obviously important. Especially with the way the curves go on that. If you have run out, I just had an axe last year that had run out in the grain on a French curve, and I watched that thing blow right in half along the run out. It's what happens. But like I said, the shorter the handle gets, the far less I'm concerned about grain orientation. And if you want to say something on that, you go right ahead, sir.
So, excuse me. I've seen a lot of axes because I collect. So I've owned a lot of axes have passed through my hands. And I've seen a lot of vintage, new old stock axes, especially here recently. And all of the failures I've seen on every axe that's in my garage, every failure is up by the neck of the handle from overstrike.
Mm-hmm.
And these axes are used. Like, they're beat up. The freaking poles are mushroomed. They went through some abuse. So I think the ratio of failures due to grain orientation are a lot less than improper use.
Oh, yes, absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
I think people get caught on this. They get so hung up on how they want this grain to be perfect. And, the reality is trees don't grow like that. Like, we don't have big monster trees anymore. So getting a straight plank out of a tree where the grain is perfectly parallel it's next to impossible. I mean, they're cutting down trees that are 12-inch in diameter and turning them into axe handles. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
And even in the old days, I don't think that when Kelly Perfect put out an axe and put out 1,000 of them, they didn't make sure there was 1,000 perfectly straight grain handles.
No, that's a fact, because you and I have both seen some that were not like 100% grain orientation perfect.
Well, in theory, I know where everyone's coming from. If the grain's wrong, it's like a leaf spring, it's going to split, blah, blah, blah. Well, in practice, it turns out that it's not exactly true. What you need to focus on, in my opinion, is grain run out. If the grain changes direction throughout the handle, where it changes direction is possibly, and this is possibly, the weak link. That's where it could possibly break. All handles can break. It doesn't matter how perfect the grain is. It can break just as easily as one that's messed up.
Yeah.
But I get people want to set themselves up for success. So they, start with the right grain orientation to begin with. Great. That's great. The problem is there just aren't that many handles. It's just not economical. And then the other thing is people they're not being really truthful with themselves. A lot of people hang a lot of axes. How many axes can you possibly use? Like, you're one man. So I know there's a percentage of people that use their axes on a daily basis, but a majority of us are collectors. So we're so wrapped up in this grain orientation on a handle that's going to hang on a wall. And I'm not trying to be a prick. I'm just being realistic. You might swing it, but the reality is you're probably not. Now, I'm a firm believer of making everything right so it is usable, but I'm not going to let the lack of a perfectly straight grain handle, internet perfect, deter me from.
Yeah, I would agree that right up until like something really curvy, like a French curve, and I'm only taking that position because I watched one blow apart because it arcs back over itself. There's such an open area, between the belly and the bottom of the handle that I watched the curve. The run out was bad. That's why the handle broke. I mean, it's a little harder to avoid, I think, with those really curvy. But I'll be honest, I did a curved haft Craftsman head for a buddy years ago that was completely running the opposite direction, but it just had a few runs of grain running through the whole thing. That axe is still swinging strong, and he uses that for his fireplace. He uses that for his camping. There it is. I've got my outdoor axe isn't perfectly straight grain, but it's a 36-inch straight handle. I honestly don't care what the grain looks like when it's a straight haft. I mean, it's less important. If it's clean, if the handle's a nice shape, it's not bent all over the place, I'm gonna use it. And my dog's flipping out because somebody beat their horn. It's all right, buddy. But yeah.
I have a Jersey. It's my most used axe, and the grain is 100% wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And including overstrikes and all, the handle still has not failed. And I hung that. It's one of the very first axes I ever hung properly. Well, and it wasn't even properly. It was, at that time, it was to the best of my knowledge. And I keep saying one of these days when it breaks, I'll replace it, but it hasn't. And I use that one if I'm out here having a fire in the backyard. That's the axe I grab. I've split many pieces of wood with that axe, and cut down a couple trees with it. It hasn't broke.
And and another thing to say on that, and the reason I think we bring this up subconsciously is chasing handle grain and a few other things that we'll cover can really spoil your fun. Like if you spend months on the endless search for a handle, you're missing out, I think, in your walk with the axe collecting. It's easy to go down these rabbit holes on stuff, and you know why? Because I can say that because I've been there. So, like, learn from our wasted time and mistakes, as it were.
And here's the thing, if you're buying the handles locally at a hardware store, chances are you're paying $10 to $12 for a handle, maybe 14 on the high end.
Mm-hmm.
If you're worried about the grain, buy two. So you already know how to hang it. Hang the axe, go swinging. If it breaks, do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're going to sell it, it has to be internet perfect.
Yeah, it's got to be internet perfect. And that's that mentality. It bleeds over to that, doesn't it? So now here comes the buyer who's obsessed with it, who won't buy an axe off of somebody because of it. It's a bad rabbit hole to go down.
Well, see,
go ahead.
I see it firsthand being a snow and Neely dealer. When I call them and order axes. This is an Amish company that has no internet. They don't have a clue what's going on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But they're knowledgeable of the grain orientation because their customers educated them.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we warranty our handles. So the amount of handles that we've actually replaced or had to warranty is next to nothing.
Yeah.
So they're just not. They're concerned about run out, and that's where it ends. They don't select any handles that have run out. The grain may be 45, it may be straight. It doesn't matter as long as it doesn't have run out. And this company doesn't warranty. I mean, they haven't had to warranty any axes. I can't remember what he told me. It was just like a stupid number, like 2 in the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's not exactly an issue. Yeah. And with that, Heartwood and sapwood, there's another one that's one of the bigger topics, I think, that cause dissension. And then you bring up the Forest Service study on it too. But that's more, I think that's the Forest Service study kind of shows that if you had a handle of all heartwood or a handle of all sapwood, you don't really have there's no real difference going on as far as strength goes. But when you start splitting them together, apparently that's where you run into issues.
Yeah.
I've done several axes. I've sold several axes that had a mixture of. Haven't seen an issue yet. So I mean, I guess I don't know. I personally think it's nothing. I don't know what the big worry is. Swing it till it breaks and put a new one in. I guess some safety sallies get really concerned that there's some safety issue there. But I mean, like, if you're swinging right next to your buddy's head, then I think you got a whole nother problem. But I don't know. I really don't have I know it's a huge topic. I just don't really have a lot of position on it. I don't really care, to be honest with you.
So I think the theory is the heartwood is a denser, harder wood, and the sapwood is a softer, lighter wood.
Maybe more springy. Yeah, I mean,
more spring versus. Dude, if you can tell the difference in your swing, come on, really, like, who swings an axe these days and can tell the difference? I mean, at the end of the day, it's hickory, right? And this is why we use hickory or ash, because of its characteristics.
Yeah, hardness to toughness, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's one more thing to worry about that you don't need to worry about.
Yeah, I don't think it's not on my radar. Some of the prettiest handles I've ever had a mixture of hardwood, sapwood going through them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you octagonal them. I had one. Even now I'm like, why did I sell that? I don't know why I sold that. But yeah, I don't think it's worth spending a whole lot of time on. But I've seen there's on the forums, on the old antiquated web forums. There, I mean, the topic got heated and endless over something that I just never. I don't know. I just didn't think it needed that much attention. So I don't know.
I've
It's
never
easy.
seen, I've never seen any proof of why not to use it. That's the thing. You see the arguments, but where's the proof?
Yeah,
Where's the
I've never seen somebody said I broke 10 handles in a row, and here are the pictures and video of a breaking at the sapwood Heartwood, where they meet. Yeah, maybe there needs to be some evidence of it. Um, but then, like again, it's a personal experience. I've never run into an issue. So, um, Ninja shelf. Somebody brought this up in the chat last night. I avoid it. If you don't, that's your problem in the end. I don't really care. I think the only downside to ninja shelving might be is you set yourself up a couple percussion points below the head for some splits to happen.
Yeah.
And and for those people who don't understand what we're talking about, you're not into the lingo. Ninja shelving is when you shape a neck out and you bring the head down in the neck. You've created a flat plane on the handle instead of shaving it all down to lead into the eye. There's a shelf in which the head comes and sits down on a little bit. And I think if you hit something hard enough and the head maybe has a wiggle or a move, you've created a point where you could chip off wood or blast down a crack or something like that.
Created a weak spot.
Yeah, you could hit a weak spot. I've seen so many accidents. It's like I've seen some from companies that had a little bit going on. Then I've seen some that it's hugely dramatic. So it's kind of all over the place. But the heads are still on there. And the handles are still together. To each your own. I prefer to lead my handles into the eye and leave it at that.
I think the thing with the ninja shelf is, it's a proven fact that if you have any structure that makes a 90-degree turn, is the most likely place for it to break. So you see it in like knife making or leather work or anything. If you have, we'll use leather for an example. If you have a 90-degree joint and you pull on both opposite sides of that, it's more likely to rip at that joint. But if you curve it, it's more likely to tear somewhere else. It makes a much stronger joint. So when you put the ninja shelf in there, the theory is if when you're swinging this axe, instead of having a nice curved transition into the bottom of the eye, you've got this step that's now a weak link, and it could possibly break. I've seen extreme cases of it where people YouTube videos where they literally carve the freaking handle out, and there's like a 1/4-inch shelf, and then they set the head on. Well, the head can't go down anymore after that, so it's just where it is. Yeah, I mean, is it like extremely critical or crucial? Like if you're just setting a head and it happens to cut into the wood a little bit, that's not as crucial as like if you're carving it out. So it's better to have a nice smooth transition, plus it looks better. So it's one of those fine details that you have to work on and decide if it's that important to you.
Yeah, I think as setting your head, you get it to some degree. I mean, I come in with my knife, and I shave it under the eye if I get any tiny bit of curl, just for I've already gone that far. I might as well make it extra clean. But other than that, yeah, I don't, to each your own. If it's something you like to do, then, well, it's your problem when it comes down to it in the end. I think this is one of Chris's favorites, leaning your axe on a wall for storage.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah, tell the myth and then the malarkey, and then you know, differentiate between the two.
So the thing is if you lean your axe against the wall, apparently some magical force will cause it to bow towards the wall, which is not completely untrue.
No, there's a degree of which this could happen, but it's the
I've seen
outrage. Yeah.
I've seen many axes with a bowed handle, and I would suspect that that's probably what caused it to happen. Um, is it going to happen overnight? No, absolutely not.
And that's literally where we're coming from with this one. People so excited over it that they're willing to put themselves out there that, oh, you can't do that at any time whatsoever for any reason. And we're not
My,
kidding. We're not kidding.
my personal experience with this is I had just finished an axe, and I took a glamour shot to share, and I leaned the axe against the wall, and within the first few comments, somebody said, "Oh, you can't do that. You're gonna bow your handle." And it was literally like, dude, I just put it there to take a picture, and I don't think that would happen for probably years. Nope, it'll happen overnight.
Yeah,
It'll be
overnight.
it'll be bowed tomorrow. And this guy was still a
That's
matter of fact.
yeah. That's the way I've heard it too. Oh, it can only take a day. Listen, I got axes sitting out in my breezeway over there that are all stood up straight at a 10, like a what, 10-degree lean maybe against the wall. They've a couple of them have been there since I moved in, and every handle is still straight. So that's not exactly high on my priority list, and I put it in with that malarkey crap. If you got to go around making comments about people not to do that, I seriously suggest you take a inner look at yourself and you know what your priorities are at. But it's just one of those things. It's just one of those eye rolls when I see somebody make a comment about it.
It's like my axes don't usually stay in one position for very long.
No, except for them over there that I'm not worried about. Yeah, mine move around. I've had them out in my. Here's a test for you. I had what, 5 sitting in my shop window with the sun on it half the day. I mean, certainly with that much rays on it, the handles they're all leaning up against the window there in the shop. None of them took a turn over a year period. Not a one of them. So I think we can leave that one to the malarkey crap. You know, if you put it at 45 degrees in a barn for the next 10 years, I'm gonna say you might gonna see some bow in the handle. And I've seen people post where they've been sitting in a barn for decades, and obviously, but overnight for a week or something like that, yeah, I'd have to see the proof.
Yeah.
And it,
I did have a handle bow on me as I was making it, or not making it, but fitting it to an eye. Or actually, I fit it to the eye, and I think I was octagoning the handle or something.
yeah, I remember that because you were sending me pictures as it was happening. Yeah,
It was almost like I was watching it bow right in front of me.
yeah.
But that's a rare case. I mean, it can't
That,
be.
that was grain. I'm gonna say that was something grain tension, or I don't know, something along those lines. And
I think it was green tension and probably not 100% dried wood.
yeah.
And once I started relieving some of the thickness, it literally bowed like right in front of my eyes. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. But that's one out of hundreds.
And this one, I don't see a whole lot of contention over, but it does. People take some real opinions on this. I put down handle soaking.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those things. It's like, I think I could get the same results wiping oil on and off and soaking over periods of time. So I don't see it as a huge issue. Some people take some real hard stances on it. I do both. So I don't know. I don't know what you think. Have any personal shots at on it, but
I just don't do it because I don't have the tank or the excess boiled linseed oil. And I'm completely content with just wiping my handle down.
Go ahead.
I just don't like, to me, I literally put no thought into it. I don't see how it could hurt you. But I don't see a huge benefit either. So it's one of those things where people get so passionate about it, but there's really no reason to.
Yeah, we can all come to the same result in the end with. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. But like I said, yeah, I don't see it as a huge contention, but people do seem to take positions on it.
Yeah.
Here's a big one, which I think has some of the most hilarious responses to is grinding the bit or sanding the bit. I mean, I think Chris and I have seen, and everybody else who's experienced have seen more hilarious opinions and comments on that particular issue. I think than I don't know, probably anything, man. Even the handle leaning, because I mean, with the extreme position, if you know what we're talking about, is anytime you put some friction to the bit, you're ruining the temper. You know, as somebody who's made knives for years, I think a lot of people are just completely clueless about how steel works. Now, I guess, you know, let's say most steels are annealed, or you can bring them down in their temper in that 400-degree range. You know, it's really easy for me. I use a 2x72 to shape and or to sharpen most of my axes. I don't anytime have the bit to a point where I can't put my hand on it. And if it was 400 degrees, I'd have a pretty bad burn. I've never seen it affect a temper. Now, a case could be made grinding on a bench grinder, on a hard stone, on high speed, and the bit getting blaze orange. I'm like, yeah, all right, you're doing damage at that point. But to go after people who use an orbital sander, or you're coming so far out of left field, it's not even funny. I mean, we have who might be the only professionals, one of the only professional things left, like timber sports guys are using giant buffing orbitals to, you know what I mean, and these jigs to do these giant fan blades edges with and stuff like that. They're the last thing on their mind is how hot the bit is getting, because it's not getting that hot. And go ahead if you got anything to say you want to say on that.
I would just say, like, we live in a time where information is so easily available to us. Before you make a comment about you're going to ruin that temper, why don't you take 5 minutes to educate yourself on heat treat? Like, you can literally learn all about heat treat in 5 minutes on the internet. You won't be an expert at it, but you'll have a better understanding. And it was like you said, if you can hang on to it, you haven't touched the tempering point yet. You haven't changed anything about that steel. So
yeah, not a thing. And you haven't held it there for an hour, you know?
Yeah. Proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Like, know your own ability, educate yourself, and have fun with it. Stop being a freaking internet genius.
Yeah, I think what's that one extreme opinion that him and some people who liked it, which tells me that there's more than just him that was thinking about that, is even putting a stone to the bit is ruining the temp. Like, well, how do you sharpen your axe at some point? I mean, at what point is this getting ridiculous? And you want to think that they're just being a troll, but like, oh no, this person's actually being serious.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's ridiculous.
Wall hangers. I think, did you have something you wanted to bring up on that?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this in other podcasts, but
yeah,
I see there's a lot of macho-ness between, making a wall hanger and making a user, and I don't really feel that there's a reason to be so stop looking at me. My wife's looking at me. She's distracted me. There's no reason to be so opinionated about it. Like,
yeah, I'd say emotional, because that's how everybody does everything nowadays.
They feel like if they get this old axe, they got to leave the patina intact and leave the character there and whatever, because they use it. Well, who cares? Yeah. What if I want to mirror polish my axe and then use it? It's my axe. It's my time. What do you care? why does it have to be labeled a wall hanger because I painted it? You know, stop with the labels. It's an axe.
Yeah, we're gonna lead into that here shortly. It's when it comes down, can't they both be equally important? The preservation, the restoration, and the archiving, so to speak, of these tools that are not made anymore. Most of these are not made anymore. I hold like I don't know. It's like I have some Connecticut's that I intend to beat the crap out of, and I have some that will never see a bite of wood in my life. They're just not going there anymore. So, uh, and I don't know. I have equal value to both of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't need to because somebody spends the time to restore something. I just don't have the need to go out and force my opinion on them over it. I suppose not on that.
It's just,
Um, and like I say, I'm not a perfect person and I'm not an expert. My opinions on some things have changed dramatically in the last maybe a little bit longer, 8 years, maybe. But we're coming to that shortly too. And you had something on lottery ticket axes, and you want to define that for the people who might not be familiar with that term.
so it blows my mind at how many people come into these groups, and not our group's not as bad about it as some of the others, and it's just due to size. But people come in, they just bought, like they're in their car, they just left the flea market and they got an axe in their lap and they take a picture of it. Can anybody give me any information about this? What they want you to say is, oh yeah, that's a rare, ultra rare $10,000 axe is what they want. They think every axe is a lottery ticket. Like that's that's it. I'm going to Disneyland.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case. It's just not. I see that, and maybe I'm being a little greedy, but like I don't even know the proper term, but like I see people ask constantly, anybody know how old it is? Well, no, but what difference does it make? Like, is it change anything? Obviously, if it's a newer Collins.
I think some people might be genuinely interested in age, but I think I think you're on track with is more people are equating the age with what value they can get out of it. And it's clear as day when they do it. Yeah.
They're looking for the lottery ticket. It's literally,
yeah. And, those, I don't want to paint everybody with a brush, but it's, you got some of you guys, I imagine those aren't people that are going to listen to a podcast about axes, but you're the kind, I don't like doing this. I like give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but you're kind of ruining it. You know what I mean? You stick out like a sore thumb. A lot of us roll our eyes at you, and generally, if you can find people that they seem earnest, they just want information. But the other ones, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. Usually because they're repeat offenders of it too.
Yeah. And you can tell, like, if a guy's sitting in his car and there's a picture of a steering wheel in the background, he literally just left the antique store and he's already asking value.
Yeah.
Well, he's obviously in it for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. When I'm buying stuff, if the price is questionable to me, I do the research while I'm standing there in the store holding it in my hand. And that's key.
You know what?
Stuff, make sure you pick it up.
Yeah, it's a good point you bring that up. This is in no way me going to somebody and going, am I paying too much for this at this antique store? I know there's some fine line going in between those two topics, but I mean, everybody should be there to help everybody else, but I don't want to see people ripped off either.
Right.
But that's, like I said too, it'd be clearly obvious, they're gonna, if it's somebody who's looking to spin it right around for value, they're probably not going to be asking a lot of people how much they should pay for it and just trying to lowball the person trying to sell it. So,
yeah, the person that takes a picture of the price at the antique store and questions it, that's not the lottery ticket. The lottery ticket's the guy that already bought it, and he's already looking for age and value on the thing. And how rare. Is it rare? Like, those are like trigger words. You know right away, hey, you just bought a lottery ticket. Yay for you. Like, but no, it's not. You didn't buy a lottery ticket.
I hear you. And we had other things to lean into, but I think as we were talking about wall hangers and stuff like that, I think we'll roll right into this, and we'll be up in an hour, I think, at that point. The labels on everything, and the one at the top of my list was I guess you coined that phrase hipster dip, but the guy called it doing the hipster thing, I think, because it was something silly. It's just this is just the topic to lean into this quick discussion, but somebody broad stroked everybody who used vinegar to remove rust as being hipsters, and it was just one of those things. Chris and I immediately got on our phones like, is this guy for real? I don't know if you wanted to say something on that before I keep going, but
it speaks for itself.
It does.
We've completely made a mockery of it. Stickers coming soon.
Yeah. It's. I think Go ahead.
Just the thought that you're a hipster because you clean your axe it's just ludicrous to me.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In the woodworking world, lots of people restore hand planes. Are they hipsters?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. What about everything one of our favorite YouTubers does, Hand Tool Rescue? Is him taking all that time to bring these tools in original working order and looks? Is that all hipster too?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. I bet you these guys that run around with that brush all the time would not say that, but for some reason do it in the axe community. They probably wouldn't think twice about the hand plane that's in original condition, brought back with all original parts, or a car. I think you made that point one time. What do you restore a car for? Back to original. Yeah. Like, why bother?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So so you can be labeled a hipster.
Yeah.
So is Jesse James a hipster?
Yeah, I know, right? Go tell him that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And with that, it's like the painting of the heads and the wall hangers, and I made this point either the last podcast or the one before. Like I said, if Kelly came out today with those nice catalogs and all the painted head versions that they had coming out and all the marketing that went into these, a sizable hand for these guys would be calling them a hipster. They'd be doing what they did to Best Made, which I was a part of that, when they first came out like 10 years ago, until I grew up. They would get that broad brush hipster. They'd be, just, I don't know, labeled and thrown aside by that opinion. And, what I see in the axe community, I guess maybe somewhere out there, somebody's dressing like a lumberjack and doesn't do anything with axes. But at what point do these guys who are using tools, restoring, working, sharpening their axes, going out and learning how to use them, at what point do they transition? You know what I mean? I guess is what's getting on my nerves. Like I said, I was one of these fools that gave Best Made Co. a huge amount of guff when they first started. And yeah, some things they do are really funky, you know what I mean? But
right.
In the end, they're guess what, guys? They're keeping axe community alive. These guys that just to do the restorations, maybe they're not swinging as much. Maybe there's just the axe throwing guys. I think they're the new ones that are going to start getting the label, because they're doing all the axe throwing clubs and stuff. Hey, they're keeping axe culture alive. We just had a bunch of them flood into our group, and I think it's great. I think it's great personally. I think I'm starting to get to the point where I'm, a couple of these guys keep popping up that just want to start hammering others for, what they do or how they paint their head, or if they clean, they choose to clean an axe and put it on the wall or preserve the tool, maybe have some serious insecurity problems when they just start calling everybody hipsters. And I think it's definitely, it's not even old anymore. It's kind of telling, and it's kind of sad, I think, at this point. Is where I've come to it. So that might be a little controversial for people. I don't care. I don't care. I think I'm well over it for a few years. I think in any way, shape, or form, people step into the axe community. Um, and if that means they want to sell like best, not to pick on Best Made Co. if they're anybody's listening. If you want to sell painted finished axes like that, hey, Kelly was doing it 90 years ago.
Yeah.
And hardened lumberjacks who would put you to shame every day were buying them. So I think people need to take a hard look at themselves sometimes, the way they go after people. And like I said, my hands raised, I was guilty of that as well. I've come around. Maybe I can help somebody else take a moment to realize it as well. But I mean, at some point, these, especially like the younger kids in their 20s and teens and stuff getting into this, I don't care how they look, they're dressing like a lumberjack or not. I don't care anymore. If he's wearing a fedora and a vintage flannel, but he's out busting wood, guess what? I mean, he's in. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think I'm over it at this point. Maybe it's just because I'm approaching 40. But that was my rant. If Chris wants to expand on that, I'm more than welcome there.
No, it sums it up. I mean, it's just, guys, just be nice to one another and take an open mind approach to this hobby. Just put down the labels, put down your man card or manliness, whatever you want, your macho-ness, put that all away. Be real with yourself. Be honest with yourself, and have fun. It's a fun hobby.
Yeah, it's political-less. It's I mean, other than, I don't know, it really should be controversial topic less.
Yeah, people they get too passionate about their thought processes and their methods. It's not really a right or wrong way of doing things. So I think people get caught up in that. They learn one way, and then it's this way or no way. And I think you're losing out. There's a lot more to learn.
You are losing out. I was, like I said before, I was guilty of it. I used to give people guff for taking the time to paint heads and preserve axes like that. And I was the worst for it because it's like a whole new depth to the restoration process, the use process, the collecting process. Yeah, I guess we're on the same page with that.
Yeah.
And at least, our podcast sets alone from the group, but it is part of it as well. Everybody's welcome. And these guys that, that just, I think the insecurity level is so high. I mean, they usually end up fading themselves out anyway. So with that, is anything else you wanted to bring up?
No. Bring them up as a pop-up. It's more,
yeah, like,
yeah, it's more poking fun of it than it is saying it's right or wrong.
It is. We're not. Yeah, don't take everything too seriously. I labeled this segment or episode "Myths and Malarkey." We could do another Myths and Malarkey part 2 like next year. It's a lot of weird things come up.
Yep.
I'd like to say also for our 4th podcast, get a guest on. What do you think about that? Let's drag somebody else on here.
Absolutely. We should do that. That way breaks things up a little bit. Definitely get somebody on.
With that, everybody, after this podcast, I'll be able to start getting statistics. But I would like to thank everybody who's been liking and sharing. And I'm sure it'll happen, but I've yet to see any really negative feedback on any of them yet. There's not any. There has been no. I've got no negative feedback.
I've gotten nothing but positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
tons of people reaching out and just out of the woodwork. Hey, listen to the podcast today. Thanks for doing this, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, we do, and we encourage you to share the podcast. It's not just for our group. It's available on Google and Apple. You can share the direct link as you find it. But by all means, put it into the the other tool forums where people might be interested in that type of thing. We always appreciate it. And with that, I guess we'll close until next time, and we'll see everybody later.
See you guys.